Hi, this is Jade with trans-coding.com. On this episode, we're going to take a look at HTML a little bit more in depth. Specifically, we're going to take a look at the head components of an HTML page and why those are important. And then we're going to look at making a link on our main page after we've made just a couple of slight changes to that. And then we're going to take a look at your standard resume, which you may or may not have built at this point. And we're going to move that to a web page in and of itself, and we're going to create a link from that first page to your resume page so that you have a way to navigate to it from the main page that we've created. Then we're going to modify that resume so that it's readable in an online format by anyone. As always, any code that we reference is going to be linked in the notes that are available from the GitHub page, and that is going to be available from github.com/trans-coding. All of the tips for resume writing can be found at medium.freecodecamp.org, and I use that to write my own resume. Alright, getting started with our index page here, you'll note from last time that I made just a couple of quick changes to the title, our H1 and H2 tags, and some of the paragraph tags here, just so that it's a little more legible. So instead of having just the basic text that we had from our page before, now it's just a little bit more descriptive of what the actual site is. So we'll go ahead and refresh that and take a look. And you can see here that this head tag only has a title element within it, and we're going to go ahead and make a couple of changes to that so that the web page is a little bit more friendly to browsers in general. So the first thing we're going to do is, prior to the HTML tag, we're going to make a doc type tag. This doc type is going to identify to all browsers that everything in this window is going to be considered HTML. Now we're not writing HTML5 because the standard is that all HTML is just HTML these days. And inside of this HTML opening tag, we're going to type lang, that stands for language, and en for English. If you're going to use a language other than English, you'll need to find the ISO code that relates to your language of choice. I've provided a list here from W3 schools, and that will be in the show notes as well. So you'll just find your language from the list, find the two-letter code that corresponds on the right, and replace the en in the HTML tag with your language. Next up, within the header tag, we're going to add a couple of meta tags. Meta tags are tags that help machines read your page a little bit better. So the first meta tag that we're going to use is charset. And charset or charset basically defines what kind of keyboard setup is allowed for the text on the page. So for this, we're going to choose UTF-8. That's the standard for modern languages today. Below that, we're going to leave the title of our page as is. And then under that, we're going to have another meta tag that's going to be the description for the page. And you can see that inside of these meta tags in the HTML tag above, we wrote a name, lang, charset, or description, equals, and then double quote sets. So this is a way of tagging the tags themselves, or giving a description for what is going on. So within each of these meta tags, you can see that Sublime has labeled the first word after meta in green, and that's because these are keywords that go along with it. That tells us that within HTML, these are reserved words for the meta tags that actually define something about it. So name means that whatever follows that is going to tell the machine something different specifically about the meta tag. So in this case, the description is going to give a description about the website, and the word that follows that, content, is going to give the content of the description. For our purposes, I'm going to use the title of the page as the content for the description. For the next meta tag, I'm going to use author for our next name, and that author is going to be myself. If you were building a website for a company, you'd want to put that company's name instead. Now a little bit further down the line, when we start using style sheets with CSS, we're going to need a way to link those in the page so that we can reference those as well, and we're going to use a link for that. Again, because we're using Sublime, we can just simply type in the word link and hit tab, and that will automatically build out our set, and then we can just simply put in the location for that. Here I'm using the default set that's used for most browsers. If you wanted to use a different location for your CSS style sheets, you can feel free to do so. And when we actually do start using style sheets, we may put them in a different location for purposes of security, and we'll make that decision when we do end up getting there. And in addition to CSS, you may in the future want to start using JavaScript. And again, we would use a script tag for that. So you would use script tag, and then we would have to give a source for that, which would be js/scripts.js. That is the default location that most browsers are going to use, especially if you build your site somewhere like WordPress or Squarespace. For our purposes, we would just write that in and leave it, and later on when we actually start using our own JavaScript setups, we'll come back and worry about that in the future. And you'll notice when we refresh the page, it doesn't appear that anything has really changed. But if we go ahead and inspect, you'll see that now we have the doctype HTML tag, we have the HTML with the language of English, and now in the header we have the meta character set UTF-8, the description, the author, the link that we had before, and inside of the body we now have the script for JavaScript. Next up, I'm going to put a link to my resume. We haven't actually built the resume yet, but I'm going to put a link, and then we're going to find a place to put it on our website. We will put a basic text version of it there, and then we'll move on from that. So I've just simply put in the text, if you'd like to see my resume, please click here. So I want this phrase, please click here, to be what someone would click on in order to see my resume. So in order to do that, I want that to become a link. And the way that we mark things as a link in HTML is with an A tag. So that's going to be A, and then href. Href is how we're going to set up those links. And then at the end of the tag, we're going to use /A. And so the href here, we're going to link on our own site. So I'm going to go ahead and set up that page. So if you remember, our website is set up with the index.php within htdocs. And so we're just going to put our next page in here as well. So if I want to link within that same folder, I shouldn't have to make any major changes. I should just put the website that I want to call it. So let's go ahead and create that. I'm going to double click in Sublime on an empty spot to create a new document within the top tab. I'm going to grab my resume with a copy paste, and you'll note that that only took the text because we are only working with a text editor. And I'm going to save that as, and I'm going to give it a name. And now that I have that name, resume.php, I'm going to make that the link. And now when we go back and refresh the page, we can click that link, and you can see we have the text up on the page. So now we're officially rendering all of the information here in this page, but it's not really all that pretty. So we're going to go back to the resume, and let's take a look at this. So taking a look back at our resume, you can see that the formatting on it is set up for a docx or a Google document file. And we want to try to emulate some of this formatting onto our web page. So the way that we're going to do that is with HTML. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is bring in some of the same components that we just did for our index file. So we're going to basically copy and paste most of the same things that we just put in. So we're going to get the doc type, the HTML tag, and the header setups. We're going to need the body tag and the closing tags at the bottom. I'm using Control to separate the highlighted sections here, just like you would when selecting multiple files. And I'm just going to paste that at the top. So for the title, we're going to replace that with our resume. And the resume itself we're going to cut and place inside the body tags. So now you can see refreshing, it doesn't look like anything has changed, but we do have a title now. That is Jade's resume. So here inside of the body tags, I'm going to just highlight the rest of the resume that we've got. And I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to hit the right square bracket just to put the tabs in a little bit and get our formatting in place. So you'll notice that Sublime sets up these lines here to show the formatting sets. So I'm going to line up the HTML tag with its corresponding closing tag. The head tag lines with the head tag closing. The body tag lines with its corresponding closing body tag. And by setting up these formats in place, anyone that comes along and reads it afterwards is going to have an easier time following along with the code. And I'm going to have an easier time coming back and editing later because I'm going to be able to see what I did as I look at the code and follow those tags through. So now I'm going to go ahead and edit the file from top to bottom for the actual resume itself. So first up on our resume, I want to get the head of the file itself. This Jade R. Selke I want to get centered, and I want to make the text a little bit bigger. We don't have to make it exactly the same as the original file, so I'm going to wrap that in a header tag. And because this is a separate page from our first page, I'm going to go ahead and make this the header file for this one, the H1 tag. And that'll be the only one on this page. So you can see that's made it a lot bigger, but it's not centered yet. So one of the things that we can add in, because this is HTML5, where you're using CSS inherently, so I can add in a style. And for this style, I'm going to add in a text-align. You can see it's going to give me that option. And we're going to use a text-align of center, which is going to center the text at the top of the page. There you see it. And I'm going to do the same thing with my email. I'm not going to use an H1 tag this time, but I might want to use, I don't know, an H3 tag or something similar. So use an H3 tag for that, and that makes it just a little bit more bold than the standard text that we're going to be using down a little bit further. Now with a quick search here at W3 Schools, we've found a way to set up a link for an email address. So we can go ahead and set that up inside of our link for the email address here. And that's going to be done with an A tag. And so I'm just going to change this someone@example.com to my email address. And I'll change the subject line that will automatically populate for them. And that %20 is a space. This target underscore top, you'll notice when we click on the link, is going to change the placement of the targeting when we click on it. So top means that whatever we click on is going to come to the top or the front of whatever a user is looking at. So it's going to become the thing that's directly in front of their mouse so that they can click on it. So you can see now that this link for my email address actually works as a way of emailing someone. Alright, next up you can see that we've got a line across between the name and the summary tab that I've got here. And if you remember from our last episode, the way that we're going to do that is just with a header tag. And that can be a self-closing tag. So you see we've got that line across now. And I'm going to repeat that for each of these areas. So I'm just going to copy that line. And I'll go ahead and copy and paste that into each of our other areas. So you can see now we've got summary, computer skills, and experience separated. Looks like I'm also going to need to separate education. There it is. Okay, so we have our lines set up, and now we can deal with each of those tabs separately. So for the section on summary, we want to have summary on a line by itself, so we're going to need to put that within paragraph tags. You can see now that that has separated that area into two different lines. And now we can just continue doing that for the rest of the page. If you don't want to type out the paragraph tabs, you can copy those, one on each side, and then you'll just place a marker holding Control for each of them, and just paste them in each area you want to create a new line. Alright, so that takes us to this experience section, and you can see in the experience section I've got three distinct sections drawn out here with the team lead full stack, the company name, and the date. And there's not really a good way to do that in HTML by simply typing out. There's no way to guarantee spacing. So the way that we're going to do that is by creating a table. So if we look at W3 Schools, this is a great website for looking for different HTML tags and looking up deeper information into each of those areas. If we look at the way that a table is set up, it's going to be with an element for table, and then TR is going to be our table row element, and then TH is used for table header, and TD is going to be used for table data. In our case, we're going to kind of cheat things because I'm not actually going to use table data, but I am going to use tables to define this team lead, company name, and year as table row and a table header, and by doing so I can guarantee that the span of them is going to go exactly 1/3 of the way across the screen, across one line. So I've set up my table here with the table row inside, and then the table headers inside of that, and then I'm just going to cut and paste my text for each of those table headers. And then as you can see, we're going to set a style on that as well. And let's take a look at what that's done. Great, so that's gone and bolded out that top line. And then for the next area on our resume, we've defined these as bullet points. So in HTML, that's going to be an unordered list. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is define a list, and then I'm going to mark off each of those items as part of that list. So for an unordered list, that's just going to be UL to define it. And then each item in the list is going to be defined with LI. And then we can just take and place each of those lines inside of there. So now you can see under this Experience tab we've set up that table row, and we've got our unordered list in place now. Now I'm just going to continue that same setup to do the rest of the job experience sets here. Okay, so that finishes out the experience section. You can see that we've got the table layouts and the unordered lists for the data here. You'll also note that these table headers in bold are not all lined up the same way. So this job and this job don't have the words lined up in the same positions when we're looking at them. One of the ways that we're going to fix this is by using Bootstrap a little bit later on. And that makes CSS much easier to deal with. For now, we're going to leave it as is, and we'll come back to it in the next video. For the education section, it looks like it's going to be another table and unordered list setup. So I'm just going to go ahead and take care of that the exact same way as above. Alright, so now that we've taken care of those setups, you can see that the result of our resume here compared with the original that we had is not that far off. So we have the centered text up at the top, we have the header rows to create the lines, and we've separated out our sections with our capitalized titles for summary, skills, experience, and education. And then we've used tables to separate out the job sections and unordered lists in order to get the bullet points for those underneath that. That completes everything to build the resume in its current form, and now we can start specializing it to a website and making it just a little bit more dynamic than what you would see on a piece of paper. Okay, so now in making this just a little bit more advanced than the resume that we had originally, one of the things that we want to do is clean up just a little bit. And so one of the things that you'll note is that this H1 we've centered, the H3 has also been centered. And in general, for me personally, I like to center all of the H tags, the header tags. And so one of the things that I like to do is center all of my titles. And so what I'm going to do, instead of just simply styling this single tag, I'm going to style all of my tags on this page for H tags. And I'm going to do that for the entire website, but for just right now, we're going to set that up for this page. So right at the top, I'm going to set up HTML tags for style. And that says that whatever goes here is going to apply to everything beneath this point. And so the first thing I'm going to style is my H1 tag. And I'm going to use that by typing H1, and then an open curly brace and a closing curly brace. And then inside of that, the phrase that we had used before was text align. And then the way that we had set that up was with the phrase center. And I don't just want to affect the H1 tag, I also wanted to affect the H3 tag. So we're going to separate those with a comma. And what that says is we're going to look for all of the H1 tags and all of the H3 tags that happen to exist on the page. We're going to find the text alignment on them, and we're going to set those to centered. So if we refresh, we shouldn't notice any change on the page because we've set this up now so that all H1 and H3 tags are centered. In addition to that, I've gone ahead and put some comments in here so that I know where the top of my resume is and where each of the sections are in comments so that as I read through this, it's a little bit easier to find things. You'll note here that this table style is a width of 100%, and it appears that all of those tables were set up that way. So this is also one of the things that I'm going to set up in the style at the top. So I'm going to set up for the table, and I'm going to set a width of 100% on that. And so now I'm going to look for that set on table, and I'm going to search for all instances of that. So I'm going to highlight the phrase style width 100%, and then I'm going to hit Control D, and that's going to highlight all of them in the document as I keep tapping through. And then I can just hit backspace and eliminate them all. So that's going to clean up some of the HTML on this page. Good. And then we can just hit refresh. And again, it appears that nothing has changed, but we've cleaned up some of our HTML. One of the other things that I want to do with my tables is that I want to change the text align in them to have the text alignment to the left-hand side. That way any of the text that's set up, even though we can't see the borders, that's going to line up the text to the left-hand side of any of the tables. So you can see all of this text now is lined up to the left instead of being lined up in the center. Now at this point, our resume is only in black and white and only in text, so one of the things that I would like to add is a couple of pictures here and there just to spice it up a little bit. So beneath the section for McGill Loans here, I'm going to remove the address for it, and I'm going to change this table header into a link. And so now you can see the address there has been removed, and McGill Loans has become a clickable link. Additionally, beneath the experience listing for them, I'm going to go ahead and put in a picture for the website, and I'm also going to make that a link. So I'm going to take the same link that I just created, copy and paste that, and then instead of using text for the link, I'm going to use a picture from the website itself. So I've already grabbed that picture, so I'm going to use image as the tag this time, and that's going to be a self-closing tag. And images need a source, and that source I'm going to use an image that I already downloaded. That is going to be called mag.png. It's a PNG file, and I've already got that inside of my htdocs folder, so that's going to be our source file for this. Now, one other change I'm going to make to this image is I'm going to give it a class. Classes are going to be names that you can give any division or element in HTML so that you can style it at the top of the document or within a CSS style sheet later. And so the class I'm going to give this is going to be job image. And I'll show you how to take care of this in just a moment, but let's make sure that that image populates. There we go. So you can see that the image did populate, and if we do click on this, it will go to that website. However, I want to make sure that it doesn't take us away from the resume. So for the target for this, I'm going to use _blank, and what _blank is going to do when I refresh this is when I click on it, it's going to send me to a new tab. So that new tab will become the priority that they see, but you'll notice that when I exit out of that, my resume tab here is still open. So one of the things that we are going to change is we're going to take this class of job image and we're going to reduce the size on the page because that does take up just a little bit too much. So up in the styles here, in order to identify a class, I'm going to use a dot in front of it, and our class is job image. And just like with the table width, we're going to define the width for these images as 50%. Take a look at the outcome of that. And that looks much better on the page. It's a smaller image, doesn't take up anywhere near as much space. And so we'll do the same thing with this next section here. For Black Diamond data, I want to make sure that I get in that website as well. So you can see these two images for Black Diamond Data and the Alliance Against Cybercrime have been placed one on top of the other. I'd much rather have them side by side, and one of the ways we can do that is by placing them inside of their own division. And the way that we do that in HTML is with an element that's labeled with div, D-I-V. So I'll go ahead and cut and paste those inside of that div, and then we'll just do a little bit of formatting to make them appear a little nicer. And as you saw, doing that didn't quite make them fit right, so I reduced the width by 1%, so they don't take up 50%, they take up a little bit less at 49%, and that ensures that they fit within the width of 100% across the page. One of the benefits of using a width of 49% or a width of 100% is that when you do resize the window, the image resizes with it. So for all of the images that we have on the page, they're going to resize with the page as you increase or decrease the size. You'll notice that the table headers that we have for these jobs also are resizing with the page. So this is a neat way to show that you understand that as sizes change with people opening and closing windows, that the screen is always going to look good with it. Okay, so that gives a really good overview of what you can really do with HTML5 and CSS. There's a lot of components that you can play with using style and the CSS sets that we showed. There's much more in depth that you can go into outside of text-align and width, and we will go into some of that more later as we start playing with Bootstrap, building in colors, and dividing up the page into something that's much more useful and pleasing to the eye. One of the other things that you may have noticed is that we really don't have a way at the top of the page that we're building to navigate through the pages that we are making. So I don't have a way to go back to the index without hitting the back button or reloading the page from localhost 8080 that we've built and then clicking the link that we made here. In the next episode, we're going to discuss some of the object-oriented ideas for building out the web page. So we'll be incorporating Bootstrap to make sure that we can make this resume look a little bit better. And then we'll talk about rerouting the page in a way that makes it more understandable and easier to follow for any user to actually use. So we'll incorporate navigation bars, and with that, that means that those navigation bars will be shared across all of your pages, and so those will be object-oriented. And so we'll also need to either review or introduce what object-oriented programming means. If you enjoyed this episode, it would be really great if you could hit that like button, subscribe, and share this episode among your friends. As always, my name is Jade, and this has been trans-coding.com.